Every night, you disappear, not just your body into rest, but yourself. The thinker, the watcher, the one who says I am, vanishes into darkness. But where does it go? What no one tells you is this journey isn't just rest. It is a ritual, a cosmic passage, a soft death we perform nightly. And hidden in that silence is the oldest secret never spoken, because consciousness doesn't sleep. It travels. They say the world is still when we close our eyes. But what if the stillness is a doorway? What if sleep is not the absence of life, but a shift in reality? Consider this each night. Without fail, we surrender ourselves. We climb into the cradle of unknowing, allowing a force we do not understand to carry us away. Our limbs soften, our breath deepens, and then the lights inside go dark. We forget who we are, we lose time, we disappear into the folds of the unseen. Science calls it sleep. Ancient traditions call it something else, a departure of the soul, a thinning of the veil, a sacred interval between worlds. But where exactly do we go? And who, if anyone, is watching? Let us journey now into this liminal realm, where consciousness dissolves and yet somehow remains, where dreams whisper truths, and silence may be the language of another plane. Because to ask what happens when we sleep is to ask what we truly are when we are no longer trying to be. Each night, a soft curtain falls across our senses. It begins quietly, a yawn, a slow blink, the dimming of sound and thought. The body reclines, the muscles surrender, and the mind, the great engine of identity, begins to drift. Soon, all that we believe ourselves to be disappears. But not instantly. First comes the hypnagogic shimmer, that flickering threshold between waking and sleep. It is here that the veil begins to fall. In ancient cultures, this was not just fatigue or biology. It was sacred. The Greeks called sleep hypnos, brother of death. To close your eyes was to court the divine unknown. The Upanishads, ancient Indian texts whispering the truths of the soul, described sleep not as rest, but as a journey inward, into the heart of consciousness itself. There, the ego dissolves. But you, the deeper you remains. We live much of our lives on the surface, in movement, ambition, conversation always facing outward. But sleep is a descent. It draws us inward, layer by layer, until the persona falls away like an old robe. What is left when memory no longer speaks? That is the first riddle of consciousness. Because as we drift into sleep, we are not gone, not entirely. Some presence remains. There is still breath, still life, still being. But the storyteller is quiet. If you've ever jerked awake just before falling asleep, you may have glimpsed the strange abyss that lies just beneath awareness, a space where thought unravels and time dissolves, a space that cannot be measured, only felt. In that liminal silence, something sacred begins. The veil is not a wall. It is more like water, soft, fluid, absorbing us gently. And what does it conceal? Not just unconsciousness, but realms of deep meaning, memory, symbol, and perhaps portals. The Mayans believed that during sleep, the spirit could roam freely through the other world. Tibetan Buddhists trained in dream yoga not to escape dreams, but to wake up inside them, revealing that even in sleep, consciousness can shine. But most of us don't remember. We cross the veil blindly, without question. And yet, every night, it opens for us, without fail, like the passage of the sun behind the horizon, not lost, only hidden. So the question emerges not just as, Where does consciousness go? But why do we allow it to leave so trustingly, so completely? Perhaps we sense something, that behind this nightly surrender is something older than words, something waiting. When the body sleeps, the soul walks. So believed the Egyptians, the Hindus, the shamans, the mystics' cultures scattered across time and continent, yet united by a single quiet intuition that sleep is not the end of awareness, but its loosening, its unfolding, its liberation. In ancient Egypt, consciousness was not a singular thing, but a layered being. They spoke of the Ka, the vital essence that stayed near the body, and the Ba, the soul bird, depicted with wings, able to fly free during sleep and death alike. To sleep, then, was to temporarily set the soul loose. The Ba could drift beyond the boundaries of the waking world, gathering insight, visiting ancestors, touching the stars, and at dawn, it would return, rejoin the body, reawaken the you who thinks the night was dreamless. In the Vedic traditions of India, a similar vision was sung. The prana, life force, remains, but the jiva, the individual soul, may slip into deeper currents. Through dreams, it communes with realms more subtle than flesh. And when deep sleep arrives, sushupti, the soul is said to rest in Brahman, the absolute, formless source of all being. In this state, there is no self, no object, no memory, only pure presence. And when you wake, the soul re-enters form like a hand slipping back into a glove. Yet you rarely recall the journey, because it happens in a dimension beneath remembering. These teachings were not superstition. They were inner maps, guides to the architecture of the unseen. And though the language is ancient, the feeling is familiar. Have you ever awoken with the strange sense you were somewhere else just moments ago? Not just dreaming, but gone, as if returning from an immeasurable distance. These are not fantasies. They are fingerprints traces of an interior voyage we undertake every night. Shamans from Siberia to the Amazon speak of dream-walking, a skill passed through lineage and ritual. To sleep consciously is to travel through past lives, ancestral memory, the soul's blueprint. But even for the untrained, sleep holds glimpses. The loved one who visits you in a dream long gone, yet somehow vividly real. The lucid moment where you know you are dreaming, and the world responds as if it knew too. These are not random sparks. They are echoes, reflections of the soul's motion. Modern minds seek data. Ancient ones sought alignment. To them, sleep was not passive. It was a sacred rite, a doorway through which the soul momentarily steps beyond illusion. And maybe, if we listen closely, we can hear the sound of its departure, not with ears, but with that silent knowing that lies just behind our heartbeat. Because consciousness may not be in the body at all, the body may be within consciousness. And sleep is when that secret becomes harder to hide. Dreams are strange, aren't they? They bend time, erase gravity, summon the long lost, the impossible, the unspeakable, and deliver it as if it were your own breath. In one instant, you're flying over oceans. In the next, you're face to face with someone who's been gone for years, yet whose eyes still remember you. And the strangest part, you believe it. For a while, it feels more real than waking. What are dreams, really? Modern science says they are the mind's attempt to reorganize, to process memory, to tidy up the noise of the day. Random firings stitched together by narrative impulse. But does that explain why ancient temples were built around dream incubation? Does it explain why kings once sought prophetic dreams before battle? Why sacred oracles slept in caves awaiting divine symbols from beyond? Why the Aboriginal Australians speak of dreamtime, a realm of creation more real than waking life? In these traditions, the dream was not an illusion. It was a mirror, not of your surface self, but of the soul. When you dream, you slip into a realm that is shaped not by laws, but by symbols. Your fear might appear as a burning room. Your longing might take the form of an open field. Everything becomes metaphor, a language the soul speaks fluently. The subconscious, of course, plays a role, but deeper still, something watches, something crafts, because within dreams, meaning bleeds through the veil. The Sufis, the mystical poets of Islam, believed that true dreams were a form of revelation, the soul peeking through the lattice of matter. In dream, the self dissolves. You are no longer bound by your name, your story, your face. You shift, you forget. You become fluid, archetypal, immense. Some philosophers have argued, if we did not wake up, how would we ever know dreams weren't real? Descartes famously wondered if life itself might be one prolonged dream. And the Tibetan Buddhists trained to awaken within the dream, not to escape it, but to see reality's nature mirrored in its strangeness. Lucid dreaming, that shimmering state where the dreamer knows they are dreaming, offers clues. There, the boundary begins to fade. Choice returns. The dream bends to your will. And in that moment, something ancient stirs, the sense that this world, too, might be more dream than stone. When you wake from a dream and feel shaken, it's not always fear. Sometimes, it is grief. Grief for something you knew in the dream, something deep. Something true that slips away like mist when the sun rises. That, too, is a kind of knowledge. Because dreams are not just illusions, they are echoes, reflections from a deeper chamber of self. They speak in riddles, in symbols, in flames and feathers and falling skies. And if you trace their meanings, they often point in one direction. That consciousness is not asleep. It is elsewhere. Modern science has done much to illuminate the night. It has charted brain waves, mapped sleep cycles, and labeled every stage REM, non-REM, deep sleep, light sleep. We know when the body enters paralysis. We know when the eyes dart beneath closed lids. We can observe the dance of neurons as the mind shifts states. But still the mystery remains. Because no scan, no electrode, no chart has ever captured consciousness itself. You can't hold awareness under a microscope. You can't bottle the feeling of I am, or explain why a vivid memory of a lost lover still makes your chest tighten. The field of neuroscience, brilliant and exacting, can tell us what areas of the brain are active during dreaming. But it cannot explain who is experiencing the dream. Who is watching the thoughts? Who knows they are asleep? Consciousness, even now, is a ghost in the machine, a riddle at the heart of science. René Descartes tried to separate mind from matter, declaring, "I think, therefore I am." But centuries later, we still don't know what the thinker actually is. Some theorists suggest that consciousness is an emergent property like steam rising from boiling water. When the brain gets complex enough, awareness arises. Others whisper more daringly that consciousness might be fundamental, not created by the brain, but channeled through it. Like a radio receiving a signal. If the radio breaks, the music stops, but the signal itself still exists. If this is true, then sleep is not the shutting down of self, but a shifting of the signal, a tuning of the dial. Quantum physics has added strange fuel to the fire. Experiments like the double-slit test reveal that observation affects outcome. Particles behave differently when watched. Reality, it seems, is entangled with perception. So what is the observer? Some scientists, like physicist Sir Roger Penrose, have suggested that consciousness may arise from quantum processes within the brain, microtubules that collapse wave functions into thought. But even this theory, elegant though it may be, cannot touch the essence. Because consciousness isn't just a mechanism, it's a mystery that deepens in sleep. We lie in bed, body still, brain humming quietly, and suddenly, we are elsewhere, in a world made of thought, feeling, symbol, a world that disappears the moment we open our eyes. And yet it felt so real. Real enough to cry, real enough to love, real enough to fear. Science explains sleep in terms of survival. It is for repair, memory consolidation, energy renewal. But does that explain the dreams? The symbols? The inner visions? Does it explain the way we sometimes wake up, changed, as if touched by something beyond analysis? Science is brilliant at describing the how, but sleep, like death, asks the why, and why implies purpose, design, something intentional. Until we understand consciousness, we may never fully understand sleep, because sleep is not just a state, it is a threshold, and thresholds are not measured in brainwaves. They are felt in silence and known in the hidden parts of the self that no scan can see. Even as the body sinks into stillness, even as dreams ripple across the dark canvas of the mind, there is something that does not move, something that never sleeps. A silent witness. You may have glimpsed it, in the stillness before waking, that moment when you're neither here nor there, yet aware you are aware. Or during a lucid dream, when the dream twists, melts, reforms, and yet you remain untouched. You are not the dream. You are the one watching the dream. And sometimes, when the dream becomes a nightmare, and you feel fear, terror, the urge to scream, another part of you knows this is not real. That part, the silent knowing, is what ancient traditions called the witness. In the Upanishads, it is the sakshi, the pure observer behind all states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. It is never affected, never altered. It simply watches. In the yogic teachings, this witnessing awareness is not a product of the brain. It is the self-Atman, the unchanging, eternal flame within all beings. It does not sleep. It does not dream. It does not wake. It simply is. Tibetan Buddhists speak of a similar presence, Rigpa, the pristine, non-conceptual awareness that underlies all experience. To rest in Rigpa is to be beyond thought, beyond identity, beyond even the dreamer. And in moments of lucid clarity during meditation, or between sleep and waking, you may feel it. A spaciousness, a stillness, an eye that sees without judgment, a light that shines regardless of night or day. This is the watcher, and it never leaves you, even when you forget it. When you fall into deep, dreamless sleep where no story plays, no images flash, there is still something there. Because when you awaken, you say, "I slept well." But how would you know that if some part of you wasn't watching? Even then, this awareness is not personal. It has no name. It is not your consciousness. It is consciousness itself. The great mystics have all pointed to this. The Sufis called it the beloved, the Taoists, the uncarved block. Christ spoke of the kingdom within, and the Gnostics taught that behind the illusion of form, the divine spark watches through every eye. In dreams, in sleep, in silence, this spark remains. Modern psychology has brushed against it. Carl Jung spoke of the self with a capital S, not the ego, but the wholeness beneath personality, the archetype of totality. And sometimes, in dream, this self appears as a guide, a teacher, a stranger who feels like home, a voice that speaks only once, yet changes everything. Because even in sleep, there is one who never forgets. When all else fades, the roles, the names, the thoughts, the flesh, the watcher remains. Silent, still, eternal, and perhaps sleep is not a loss of consciousness, but a return to the one that never left. And then you wake. Not slowly, not always. Sometimes it's abrupt, like being pulled from the depths by invisible hands. The body stirs, the light returns, the room is familiar, but your breath still carries the rhythm of elsewhere. For a moment, you hesitate. Something lingers, a scent, a sensation, a shadow of where you've just been, and then it vanishes, gone, like a dream at sunrise. But where did you return from? Waking is a ritual we perform each morning without question. The body reboots, the mind reclaims its name. You check the time, you scroll, you speak, but in truth, what is waking? It is not simply resuming thought, it is the re-entry of identity, like the soul stepping back into costume after wandering the stage of the unseen. In ancient traditions, waking was not taken for granted. It was considered a rebirth, a daily resurrection. The Egyptians believed that the sun god Ra traveled through the underworld each night, battling darkness, only to rise again in the morning triumphant. In their myth, your consciousness mirrored this cosmic cycle: death, descent, return. In Hindu cosmology, waking life is called Jagrat, the world of action and illusion. But it is no more real than the dream or sleep. All three are states' temporary masks of the eternal self. To awaken is not simply to open the eyes, it is to step back into the world of form, to remember your story, your role, your name. But in that instant before memory reattaches, do you notice it? That brief shimmer of no one, the moment before the eye returns. That is sacred, because in that space, you are not someone. You are being itself. And the deeper truth is this: you never actually left. Just as clouds drift across the sky without touching it, your consciousness moves through sleep, through dreams, through forgetfulness, but remains untouched. The sky is always there, even when it's night. The Tibetans call this re-entry a bardo, a transitional state. They apply it to death, but also to waking. To move from sleep to waking is to pass through a veil, and with it comes a choice: will you forget, or will you remember what you touched beyond the veil? Have you ever woken up with the answer to a question you didn't know you asked, a sudden sense of clarity, peace, or quiet sorrow? That is the residue of the unseen. The soul returning with something subtle but real. In the mystery schools of old, they taught that the soul gathers insights in sleep, truths it cannot speak in words, only in feelings, intuitions, strange metaphors that arrive days later, as if whispered from a place just beyond the veil. And so waking is not the end of sleep, it is the harvest. It is the return from the temple. But we rarely pause. We brush off the stardust, silence the voice, grab coffee. What if, instead, we listened? Not just to the dreams, but to the silence beneath them, to the spaciousness we passed through, to the eternal witness we briefly remembered. Because perhaps, each morning, you are not just waking up, You are being welcomed back from a place older than time, more real than form, and made of the same light that still glows behind your eyes. What if waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are not the full story? What if there is a fourth state, one that hides between the folds of perception, silent, eternal, untouched by thought or sensation? The ancient sages of India called it Turiya. Turiya is not a state you enter. It is the backdrop behind all other states. While waking comes and goes, while dreams rise and dissolve, while sleep veils and unveils the self, Turiya remains. It is the witness not just in experience, but beneath it. Imagine a candle. The flame flickers in wind, dims in darkness, but the wick, the essence, stays. Turiya is that wick. In the Mandukya Upanishad, a sacred text composed of a single haunting verse, it is written that Turiya is neither inward knowing nor outward knowing, nor both, not a mass of knowing, unseen, ungraspable, undefinable, peaceful, blissful, non-dual. This is the self. And what's more, they say you are this. Not your name, not your thoughts, not the sleeper, not the dreamer, not the one who awakens, but the one who holds them all. It's as if all the states of being are waves, and Turiya is the ocean. This idea is not confined to the East. Mystics throughout history have pointed to a substrate of awareness, a divine field beneath identity. The Christian contemplatives called it the cloud of unknowing, a sacred darkness in which the soul rests beyond image or word. The Sufis speak of fana, the dissolving of the self into the divine presence, not sleep, not trance, but a radiant stillness without edge or center. Zen masters call it no mind, a space where nothing arises, and yet everything is possible. In these traditions, consciousness is not something the brain produces. It is the canvas on which experience is painted. Waking is a brushstroke, dreaming another, sleep a pause. But the canvas, it never moves. And here lies the paradox. You've never not been in Turiya. Even now, as you read this, something watches quietly, behind the thoughts, the breath, the images. You've felt it in moments of awe, in stillness, when looking at the stars or holding a newborn. That sense of nothing missing, no time, no self, just isness. That is not a state, that is your essence. So where does consciousness go when you sleep? Nowhere. It simply ceases to pretend. The mind sleeps, the dreams swirl, the senses go dark. But Turiya remains still, observing, whole. It is not a destination. It is the home you never left, the reality that dreams, wakes, and sleeps within you. And now, we return to the question, where does your consciousness go when you sleep? The answer, perhaps, is simple. And yet, like all sacred truths, it cannot be held in the hand, only felt in the stillness between thoughts. Because consciousness doesn't go, it doesn't move, it does not vanish or return. It remains like the sky behind shifting clouds, like the silence beneath music, like the breath beneath your name. What sleeps is the mind, what dreams is the subtle self, what wakes is the body. But what is aware of all three, that is who you are. And this awareness is never lost, only forgotten. Forgotten in the rush of identity, in the stories we wear, in the fears we believe, in the morning alarms and evening screens. But each night, as the body surrenders, as the story dissolves, As the dream takes shape or silence takes hold, consciousness returns to itself. Not as a thing, but as being. The great mystics have always whispered this. You are not the dreamer. You are not the sleeper. You are not even the one who wakes. You are the light that shines through all of it. And the journey of sleep, its descent, its symbols, its mystery is not a disappearance. It is a rehearsal, a nightly remembering of what death may truly be, not an end, but a return. To the presence behind the veil, to the watcher who never blinks, to the field where no fear exists, because there is no other to fear. What if, in sleep, the soul stretches not away from the body, but back into its natural vastness? What if your most peaceful nights are not accidents, but visitations? What if the dreams that linger were not dreams at all, but messages from the part of you that never left the source? And what if, tomorrow morning, when you wake again, you pause, just for a moment, before your name returns, before the phone glows, and in that pause, you listen, not with ears, but with the stillness behind your ribs, with the ancient knowing behind your breath. You may find something waiting, not a word, not a vision, but a presence. Familiar, whole, silent. The truth is, your consciousness never leaves. You do, but only for a while, only until you remember. And when you do, perhaps the veil was never closed. We simply forgot we were light.